Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, throughout the region and beyond, it's always important to remember how the war began. 326 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 109 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The next day, on October 8th of last year, Iran practically joined that war when it greenlighted its proxy in Lebanon to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. It sought to divide the forces of the IDF between South, which are engaged with the Islamist Hamas at the time and still doing so, and the North, in order to ensure that Hamas would not be eradicated. Since then, thousands of rockets have been fired from Lebanon towards Israel. On October 17th, also, the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe, joined the war with not only launching projectiles towards Israel, but also frustrating freedom of navigation through the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. Additional rockets were also fired from Iraq, from Syria, including from Iran proper, on the night between the 13th and 14th of April, when the Islamic Republic launched over 300 projectiles, including unmanned aerial vehicles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. 99% of them were intercepted. Nevertheless, Iran now is yet again poised to launch a wide-scale attack against Israel. And to deliberate that and much more, let's now turn to TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, what can you update us with on the latest?
So as we all recall, because this is very fresh, 2 days ago, the Israeli Defense Forces, mostly the IAF, the Israeli Air Force, had intercepted and deflected a massive offensive by Hezbollah. Nevertheless, more than 300 projectiles were launched at Israel, most of them at the northern part of the country. Some of the drones were intended to reach central Israel, where several defense facilities are concentrated. This did not happen. And the bitter irony is that now that this peak event is over, we are supposedly back to normal. But this normal is anything but normal. The northern part of Israel is under a constant barrage, dozens of rockets every day, fires breaking out wherever either the drone rocket or the interceptor rocket hits the ground. In Gaza, fighting goes on. There are terror acts almost daily in Judea and Samaria, mostly in Samaria, which is the northern part of the West Bank. And many of the residents of the Galilee and Golan Heights, the northern part of Israel, are quite bitter at the government because of the impression given that only when Tel Aviv and its vicinity are at risk does Israel go on a preemptive strike. And then once it is over, it is back to the abnormal. One other note, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, was in Israel yesterday, meeting with his counterpart, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, sitting in on a war council at IDF headquarters and at the IAF command center, and then flying on to the Northern Command with the commanding general of the Northern Command. The Pentagon spokespeople have announced that many of the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets that the United States has in the area or above it. Of course, they also have satellites, were at the disposal of Israel before and during the Sunday morning action, but that no American units took part in actually intercepting the missiles, let alone attacking inside Lebanon.
Indeed. Let's now turn to central Israel, where we're joined by the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to start by asking you particularly about the continued attacks, cross-border attacks, launches of various types of projectiles, including particularly unmanned aerial vehicles and shoulder-propelled anti-tank missiles toward border communities. Is this an indication that the enemy's storage facilities of medium to short-range projectiles is diminishing after 11 months of cross-border attacks, with seemingly ongoing activities on the offensive by the Israeli Air Force to degrade those capabilities as much as possible? Is it starting to feel that brunt?
Well, Jonathan, maybe a word about what we've seen denying the attack of the Hezbollah toward Israel. You know, we talk about it quite a lot here in this program. Then when it comes to the shooting against or to fight against rockets and missiles, there are four main pillars that the doctrine is basically applying. The first one is attack, the second one is alert, the third one is active defense, and the fourth one is passive defense. And this is exactly what we've seen. The Israeli Air Force attacked with a vast number of airplanes and denied quite a large numbers of projectiles that were planned to be shot toward Israel. Then there was quite a good alert to the civilians and to the military installations in the area, mainly in the north part of Israel. The people that heard this alert went to the secure areas, and the active defense was done by mostly the air defense warriors, but also by our pilots. Some of the UAVs were intercepted by fixed wings, and some others were intercepted even by helicopters. The end result was that we had no injuries, even not one. Unfortunately, there was one Navy soldier that was killed, but it was not from the enemy fire. And so the result was, as I said, that we had no one that was hit. There were some damages to property, but not for any people. And this is exactly what we are talking about when we are continuously talking about this doctrine. The challenge is that it didn't really change the equation, or let's say the strategic posture of Israel in the northern part of Israel. The strategic posture of Israel in the northern part stayed the same. Israel is still on the attack on the south part of Israel strategically, and in defending, active defense, as we call it, posture in the northern part of Israel. And this takes me to your direct question. Unfortunately, if we are looking on the last weeks, the number of missiles, projectiles, and others that were shot toward Israel is basically the same. Although we are hitting quite hard, a lot of strikes, mainly within the close kilometers to the border of Israel with Lebanon, but unfortunately, the Hamas and the way of the kind of attrition war between us, the Hamas, is still continuing. So at least from this aspect, I don't think there is a huge change. And this is the main challenge of Israel. Israel would have to decide after 10 months, almost 11 months, if it wants to change the posture on the northern part of Israel. And this is the strategic decision that most of our, I think, people mainly on the northern part of Israel are waiting for. And it seems that it is time to deal with the north.
Thank you, General Gavish. Let's now turn to elsewhere in central Israel, where we're joined, excuse me, by the former chief of the intelligence directorate at Mossad, General in Reserve Amnon Sofrin. I'd like to ask you particularly, when we're looking at the latest statements, let's start with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. He highlighted that the capabilities of Hezbollah are now far diminished, and that this evidence and this fact should force Hezbollah to recalculate its various activities and actions. In tandem, we hear the same individual, the Jerusalem's top defense official, come out and say that we're gradually moving our center of gravity from the Gaza Strip to the north, specifically Lebanon, to confront this Iranian proxy and to restore the sense of security, not only security, but a sense of security to the residents of northern Israel to be able to return to their communities. Now, at the same time, we hear the Americans highlight the need for de-escalation somewhat obsessively by all actors within the current administration in Washington. And then it seems like Defense Minister Gallant, during his meeting with C.Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, came out and highlighted the need to work now together in order to prepare for frustrating Iran's quest for nuclear weapon capabilities, something that may need to happen in the event that the Iranians seek to break through. Is Israel trying to leverage quiet for the sake of attempting to prepare for something more concrete against the Islamic Republic?
Let me refer to the questions that you raised one by one. First of all, regarding what happens in Lebanon. To declare that the capabilities of Hezbollah were diminished, it's a huge understatement. It didn't really happen because Hezbollah has a lot of warheads. Of course, the assessment was of 150,000 warheads of all kinds. And if we succeeded in hitting 5,000 or 6,000, no matter what, how you calculate it, and of course what was published, and nobody can make sure that this is the right figures, that means we still have a lot of stockpiles that can be launched to Israel of all kinds, to all ranges, and of course the accurate ones were not used and were not diminished. So Hezbollah keeps on with its capabilities and can launch rockets and missiles to Israel on a daily basis, and even to extend the ranges if needed and when needed. That's part A. Now, of course, everybody is trying to make all the efforts to calm the area and to avoid a great escalation in Lebanon from both sides. And this is the mission of Mr. Rockstein, trying to broker some deal or some arrangement that will in the end bring out, first of all, the implementation of 1701, and on the other hand, to stop Israel from launching a huge fight or a great escalation on Lebanon. Now, regarding what happens with Iran, we are still waiting to see what Iran is going, how Iran is going, and when is going to react on what happens with Ismail Haniyeh. That, of course, Israel is being blamed for killing him in Tehran. And when the chairman of the Joint Staff left Israel, he told the reporters that Iran still reflects what we call the greatest danger to the Middle East. That means that even he thinks, probably, that Iran is going to react in some way. And of course, they will choose the time and for the method. They don't want to go into great escalation with Israel, and they will try to find a way to balance between those two actions. On one hand, to react, on the second hand, not to be dragged into a greater escalation with Israel. Now, regarding the nuclear capabilities of Iran, we still were following it very closely, and we know exactly the situation right now regarding the nuclear capabilities and the nuclear program of Iran. Israel cannot attack Iran on its own without being coordinated and, of course, and without the assistance of the US. And as I see it right now, the US doesn't have any intention to participate in such an attack on the facilities of Iran. And regarding that, we still have to watch and to make up our minds if it's going to escalate and Iran is going to cross the threshold and become what we call a nuclear state, or very close to a nuclear state, then we'll have to decide how to act.
With regard to the latter, it seems like the Americans, for a first time in a very long time, have all the assets in place in order to make such a strike against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Of course, political will is the most important factor within this equation. Nevertheless, it is also a resounding don't, as was stated time and again by the leadership in Washington. Mr. Oren, the negotiations right now are taking place in Cairo in order to try and find some sort of a arrangement between Israel and the Islamist Hamas. It seems, though, that the negotiations are focused not on the most difficult topics that remain in contention, but rather the list of prisoners, the veto power that Israel has over the list of prisoners, and so on and so forth. Does that indicate that the United States wants to establish some sense of success in a process of sorts in order to infuse some life into this ongoing process?
When you say difficult, the question is difficult for whom? For the Netanyahu government, the question of how many prisoners, who are they going to be, and where are they going to be in exile, this is a very important issue. It may not be the most difficult one between Israel and Hamas, but between elements in the governing coalition and their political base, it could be very difficult once the list is being published and families of those murdered by those prisoners who are about to be released reacting. So this is still ahead of us. But yes, it is true that the negotiators under the guidance of CIA Director Burns and National Security Council official McGurk are trying to narrow down the areas in contention to those on the ground, the so-called Netzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor, to put them aside and work on the less difficult, if not easier, at least less difficult issues. And they want to see, of course, a bottom line. It is not enough to feed the news cycles by optimistic assessments that, yes, we are closer than ever, it is within reach, at hand. One must show the deal. And to my mind, the real question is, what will the mediators give the various parties? Not only relay messages in proximity talks from one side of town to the other, or from one hotel to the next one, but what can the United States, Egypt, and Qatar give Israel and Hamas, of course, separately, but what can they give the parties in order to show their domestic audiences that they did not concede too much?
In any event, whatever they give Hamas, it cannot be a lifeline, and that is an understatement, since this terror organization has written its rights the moment it launched its blatant onslaught on October 7th, and that will never be forgotten. But General Gavish, I'd like to ask you, when we're looking now at the additional proxies alongside the threat to launch a direct attack from the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israeli territory. They seem to have gone down that ladder since now they're speaking about a coordinated response and all kind of different mantras to avoid prospects of wider escalation that will bring about an abrupt end to this regime once the United States steps in, of course. But let's turn our attention to Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen. They continue to launch various anti-ship rockets, missiles, and water unmanned or autonomous vehicles that explode into various commercial vessels along this very vital trading route on a global scale. What can be done in order to frustrate those activities? And is it a matter of mandate or is it a matter of because the tools at the American disposal are obviously far superior to those Houthis. Is it maybe a matter also of intelligence in this context?
Well, Jonathan, it's a matter of decision. Simple as that. The situation is that, as you said, the Houthis are shooting all kinds of projectiles, still doing it. The meaning behind it is that they are not deterred. They are not deterred from the coalition that is in their area. And we all have to remember that the Houthis are not working by themselves. They are being directed and from Iran. And so, unfortunately, I've said it before with regards to Lebanon, but here too, the strategic posture is not changed. Also in all our area, the Iranians are still shooting toward the coalition, toward the Western shipments, and we see, by the way, that they are still very active. We talked about Lebanon, but 2 days ago there was a projectile coming from Syria. So nothing really changed from a strategic point of view, unfortunately. From when it comes to the defending Israel and the defense posture, let's put it this way, probably the posture of U.S. and coalition forces in this area, we don't remember something like this. The amount of weaponaries that we see shipped, submarines, defend assets, and also assets with attack capabilities. Everything is here. So it is really a matter of decision, and it comes mainly to the political level, because I'm sure that if you would ask the military level within, around us, let's put it this way, the capabilities are there. So going back to my initial short answer, this is a matter of decision.
The militaries are seemingly frustrated, and we see this in the faces and the patterns and speeches of the senior officers in the U.S. military, in Central Command. They are hoping for better leadership when it comes to determination to frustrate this activity, because the limitations put on them are basically leading them to failure, and that's not of their own doing. Just 2-3 days ago, we saw the Deputy Press Secretary at Pentagon, Sabrina Singh, who carries out the message of the administration, but that's not the point. She was speaking about the necessity for the Houthis to take into account the environmental damage and not understanding why they are going to do that. The Houthis don't care about environmental damage, and that just doesn't make any sense. But we don't have very much time left, and I'd like to ask you, General Sofrin, we see just a couple years after Israel and Sudan almost fostered a peace agreement, at least we're on the path towards that. We see now Abdel Fattah al-Burhan relying more and more, particularly when we're talking about his successes, on Iranian capabilities, on Iranian drones. Is this a indication of a trend that may be damaging to relations with Israel? And if so, could this foster into something problematic for the entire region, for that matter?
If you look at what happens between Israel and Sudan, you can't compare it within, for example, about with the relations that Israel has with the UAE or with Bahrain or all the other countries that signed the Abraham Accords. Sudan is a different entity. It is ruled by what we call a military junta that controls the country, and they chose their own way to rely on Iran, to receive weapon systems from Iran, to be assisted by Iran economically. And it goes back to the years that Sudan cooperated with Hamas, with other entities, and allowed weapon convoys to land on its shores and to be delivered into Gaza by various systems. So I don't think that Sudan is really committed to Abraham Accords. They try to live between those two worlds, on one hand to receive assistance from the US, relying on these accords they signed. On the other hand, they don't feel committed to Israel. And of course, right now, when we are in the middle of fighting with the Palestinians, they reject it, of course, and now they turn into on the side of Iran. And being assisted by Iran, Iran is taking advantage because Iran receives the ability to get approach to the Red Sea, even though they don't allow the Sudanese, don't allow them to build their own port. What they allowed or enabled the Russians to do, they don't enable the Iranians to do the same. But nevertheless, they will gain, in the end, the access to the Red Sea, and this is a bad news for us.
This is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately also thank General Sofri and General Kavish and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.